Raising the nuclear stakes in Iran, Russia gives a green light to launch Iran's first nuclear reactor. Iran will load uranium into the reactor at Bushehr starting in 8 days, we're told, defying the international community's demands to stop its nuclear program. Ambassador John Bolton is a former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations and a Fox News contributor. Mr. Ambassador, Russia is one of the 6 countries that is charged with trying to prevent Iran from developing a nuclear bomb. So why are they helping out with this nuclear reactor?
Well, I think that tells you a lot about the state of Russian cooperation in the overall effort to prevent Iran from getting nuclear weapons. This plant has been constructed by Russia. For years, the United States urged them not to send the uranium fuel rods. They finally did that. The Obama administration has urged them not to insert the rods into the reactor, but as they've just announced, that will begin next week. And what that does over time is help Iran get another route to nuclear weapons through the plutonium they could reprocess out of the spent fuel rods.
They have been building this plant for, what, 15 years. They got a $1 billion contract from the Iranians to do it. They dragged their feet, and everybody thought they were doing that because they were frankly concerned about Iran's nuclear program. Once they put that fuel in, they've lost pretty much all the leverage, haven't they?
Well, 2 things happen. Number one, it makes it, I think, essentially immune from attack by Israel, because once the rods are in the reactor, an attack on the reactor risks spreading radiation in the air and perhaps into the water of the Persian Gulf. So that means that the reactor's up and running and will continue to run, and the normal processing of the uranium, the controlled fission reaction, will produce plutonium over time. And in the normal operation of this reactor, in just a fairly short period of time, you could get substantial amount of plutonium to use for nuclear weapons.
But I thought the UN had all these sanctions against Iran that would, that are designed to prevent nuclear proliferation in that country. Why don't they apply to this particular plant?
Well, the United States itself has not pressed for Bushehr to be shut down, operating both in the Bush and the Obama administration under what I believe is the mistaken theory that Iran is entitled to the peaceful use of nuclear energy. I don't think Iran is entitled to that, or I don't think we ought to allow it to happen, because they're manifestly violating any number of obligations under the Non-Proliferation Treaty not to seek nuclear weapons. But this has been a hole in American policy for some number of years, and Iran and Russia are obviously exploiting it.
Well, the Obama administration famously wanted to hit the reset button for relations with Russia. Is this the thanks we get?
I think this is a very important point. The Russians have said that that they're willing to comply with existing UN sanctions but not go beyond it. And after all this time of withholding the fuel and then not inserting it, they're going ahead. This puts Iran in a much better position overall. And it also calls into question when the Russians may deliver this S-300 air defense system, a very sophisticated system that they've also been withholding. So I think this is a very delicate point. And as I say, it closes off to the Israelis one possible target for preemptive military action.
Well, it also, I guess, is an illustration of the lack of power and maybe teeth of the United Nations here, huh?
Well, nothing new there. There's simply no doubt the UN sanctions have not had and will not have any material effect on Iran's push to have deliverable nuclear weapons. This is simply one more piece of evidence and something I think has been obvious for quite some time.
We're talking about this reactor being loaded with fuel and maybe ready to run in 8 days. You wouldn't expect to see some kind of a military attack by Israel in that amount of time, would you, to prevent those fuel rods from being loaded?
Well, if they're going to do it, that's the window that they have. Otherwise, as I said before, once the rods are in the reactor, if you attack the reactor, you're going to open it up and radiation will escape, at least into the atmosphere, possibly into the waters of the Persian Gulf. So most people think that neither Israel nor the United States, come to that, would attack a reactor after it's been fueled. That's why earlier in history, in 1981, Israel attacked the Osirak reactor outside of Baghdad before it was completed, and why in September of 2007, Israel destroyed that North North Korean reactor being built in Syria. So if it's going to happen with Bushehr, it has to happen before the fuel rods go in.
Ambassador John Bolton. Mr. Ambassador, thanks.
Thank you.
Katia, the opening of the nuclear plant will be a big day for Iran, won't it? The event that's been delayed several times now. So have Russia and Iran settled all the issues over the plant?
Alice, it does seem that all the details have been hammered out. Of course, the start date of the Bushehr power plant, Iran's first nuclear power plant, has already been delayed a number of times. The construction originally began in 1970s. It was underdone by the German side, but after the Iranian Revolution, construction was halted and then picked up by Russia in the 1990s. Originally, the launch date was planned for around the year 2007, but Iran ran into a few financial difficulties, not being able to pay its bill in full, and therefore the launch date was delayed. Of course, now the Russian Nuclear Agency is saying that the date of the launch is to be August 21st. That's just in a matter of days, and it is causing a lot of media attention, of course, as Iran is under a lot of sanctions from the United Nations at the moment. However, both the nuclear watchdog, the international nuclear watchdog, the International Atomic Energy Agency, and the Russian Nuclear Agency say that every step of the process will be very closely monitored. And to talk a little bit more about the process and the implications of what this means for Iran, for Russia, for the international community, I'm joined live by the official spokesperson of Russia's state nuclear agency, Rosatom, Mr. Sergei Novikov. Mr. Novikov, thank you so much for being here. Now, Iran is currently under a lot of sanctions from the United Nations, but we were led to understand that Bushehr is not actually included in those sanctions. How does this work?
Well, I think it is a very strong signal that international society supports such peaceful projects as Bushehr, because everybody understands that you cannot anyhow use nuclear power plant in your hypothetical military program. Nuclear power plant is just to generate electricity, and it is true that there are two elements which we call it of double purpose. It is enrichment and spent fuel management, but both these elements are taken out of Iranian responsibility, because we are going to supply with nuclear fuel Bushehr nuclear power plant for all the lifetime, and then we'll take this spent fuel back to reprocess it on Russian area.
Now, I understand the International Atomic Energy Agency is also working with you on monitoring this. How do they participate?
They're working with us, with the Iranian side. Everything what happens on Bushehr side is happening under the control and safeguards of IAEA. For example, now fresh fuel is sealed by IAEA, so on 21st the inspectors will take these seals out. They will take out the fuel assemblies from transport containers and put this fresh fuel, fissile material, into reactor unit. It means that from this moment we'll consider and we'll certify this plant as nuclear energy installation. This event will symbolize that the period of testing is over and the stage of physical startup has begun.
Do you think that the fact that the world will see Iran's using peaceful nuclear energy will somehow help establish its motives? As they say, they do only want peaceful nuclear energy. Do you think this will help?
Well, it depends not on Rosatom on Russian side, it depends on Iranian side. But what we are doing, everything was done under the control of IAEA, and we repeated a lot of times that since IAEA is not involved, we stop all the operations. Now is everything safe and under international control.
Fantastic. I'm sure it'll be a magnificent event to watch the launching of the Bushehr power plant. Mr. Novikov, thank you so much for being here. As you see, Alice, 21st is officially the launch date for the Bushehr power plant. I'm sure the media's eye will be on Iran on that day.
I'm sure as well. All right, Artie's Katerina Azarova and Sergei Novikov there, the spokesperson of the Russian state nuclear corporation Rosatom. Many thanks to you both.